Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we're going to go ahead and we're going to wrap up the rest of these Senior Bowl practices, go for the entire roster. I'm not going to be able to note necessarily every single player, but the ones I've watched, going to give you my thoughts, just kind of things I learned, and that's it, for our Senior Bowl coverage. I will have a mock draft out hopefully tomorrow morning that will go over just kind of the things that happen at the Senior Bowl, maybe where some players go. It will just be a Jaguars mock draft, but we do that every year. So I'll have that out. But yeah, this thing is pretty much wrapped up. The game is on Saturday. I will not be there for it. I may be home in time to watch it, at least online. But yeah, as far as our coverage, we're kind of at the end of this thing and getting ready to pack up here. So with that all said, we're going to go ahead and jump into this. We're going to start with the national team, which was the first to practice each day. So starting with Ollie Gordon here, I think the biggest thing I noted from him, which he was not a player I watched a ton, but he was really struggling today in pass protection reps. It was something something he's generally struggled with. And so didn't like to see that. He was on the ground a lot, just kind of missing blocks. And in a class where so many running backs are so good at pass protection this year, I think that's a big knock on him as a prospect because you have a major disadvantage to a lot of these other players. And can you really be out there full time if you aren't going to be able to block, right? Because then maybe we're talking about a committee for said player. Now, the next guy I talk about, Azareye'h Thomas. Let me correct this. Azareye'h Thomas, I believe, is his actual pronunciation. Whenever we have those interviews up on the YouTube, or if you've already watched them on Twitter, I think he even refers to himself as that, so I feel kind of bad if I called him the wrong name, or at least pronounced it wrong. But talking about Thomas here, I think the big thing that I would say I took out of this week was that this is someone who is a super competitive player. I'm not sure exactly where my grade was on his mentality, but he's someone who wants to compete to the point where, day one, he struggled against Tez Johnson, and then he's going into the slot on day two just so he can play against Tez Johnson and see if he can beat him because he wants to take on that challenge. So this is a guy who is very competitive, who's not afraid of having to do something difficult, and someone who wants to get better and better and better. And that was even something he mentioned in our interview that we did with him, which you guys can check out, like I said, on Twitter, or I'll have it on YouTube hopefully later tonight, where he didn't call himself a great player right now. He says he's good and he's working on great. So I really liked what I got from him this week. I think he's someone who's going to be a stock-up candidate in general. Now, next guy, Donovan Edwards. I have not been super high on him, but I did want to note he is among those players at running back who are very good in pass protection. He has some great reps there, just stunting rushers, and that's going to be something that he's going to be able to bring to the NFL level and maybe allow him to be an all-around, do-everything type of back. Now, getting to our next guy here, Dylan Gabriel. I thought he did well earlier this week. But ultimately, for Gabriel, I just felt like today was kind of a down day for him, especially in the red zone. That was an area he struggled. He, I believe, had one pass batted away, and then he had an interception he threw to Tommy Hill, who had a pretty good week. And, just kind of a rough note to end on. And this is someone who really, where he sits right now, I think it's sort of like maybe where Jordan Travis did, where it's like a day 3 type of pick. And for him to get higher in this class, I think he had to have a great week out here. And ultimately, I would not say he had a great week. I think he did fine, but he didn't really keep at that same level of performance the whole way through. Now, we'll get to a couple names that I had not written down before. I have not scouted these players closely. But Darius Alexander, he was someone who consistently stood out, who was winning reps, who was just, you could not miss him if you were watching the defensive line drills, or if you were watching 11 on 11. He was a phenomenal player this week, and he's someone who's earned a spot on my big board once I'm able to scout him. Same thing for Kyle Williams here. Maybe not that level, but Kyle Williams ultimately was showing a lot of skills that make you think this is a guy who can be a starting receiver. Looked every part of that, and therefore, like, he deserves to be talked about in this class. So I think a lot of people are going to be coming home from this and scouting him. You know, he's definitely going to be on my list of players I need to be looking at. Now, getting to probably, I think the biggest winner of this week, maybe it's a little debatable, but Mike Green, who I don't know why he's not listed on here. Maybe he was in National. I don't know. I'm missing him on here. But we'll just say he's here, right? Mike Green. He had a great, right? He was someone who, I think from the moment you saw him, took care of a lot of the concerns, right? This was someone who was at one point said to be 236 pounds. He comes in at 251 at the Senior Bowl. Looks every part of it. You know, you keep in mind he does have a smaller frame, right? He's about 6'3", 32-inch arms, just a little bit longer than that. But he is rocked up, right? He is not only the phenomenal athleticism, but he has the power as well. And when he brings both those things together, he can destroy players to the point where he completely kicked Josh Connerly's ass on a 1v1 rep, to the point where when Mike Green pulled out of the Senior Bowl early, as every overperforming player does each year, he had to put out a post basically saying Josh Connerly is still going to be a great player. Like, I thought it was hilarious to read it. Like, dude's got to defend him after ending his career seemingly. But that's the kind of week he had, right? He's been phenomenal. I think he's easily earned a first-round grade at this point. I did hear from one of the scouts out there, just talking to someone I personally follow, that there is a potential concern regarding his transfer from his former school and why that happened. There's a lot of ambiguity around what actually happened. And I'll not go into details on it, but I'll just say there was an accusation made that we don't know if it's true or not, right? And that happens in our day, right? I'm not going to go into detail on that, but sometimes people get falsely accused of things. Sometimes people legitimately commit a crime or do something wrong and get accused of it. And so there's a little bit of concern there regarding that. It's a long time since this thing has happened, but that's what I heard. And I'll just say, if he's someone who falls really far on draft day, maybe it's something legitimate, but I would not look at it as such. You know, we do live in a country that is innocent until proven guilty, and that's how I treat it with Mike Green. So just something I heard. It's worth noting, at least for a moment. Now, Anais Peebles, probably just destroyed his name. That's okay. He was such a good offensive line penetrator, right? Just finding the gap, getting through quickly, blowing up plays. This is what he's going to be able to do really well, right? He is a smaller defensive lineman, but what he's able to do is very impressive. I think he's someone who in the NFL should have quite the impact. And of course, the flip side is this a player who can play full-time, right? There's legitimate questions about that. Is he someone who's going to be able to hold his point of attack in the run game, right? He's not a big player. He's a really good athlete for a reason. But what he does well, he put on full display, and I think he's put himself from that day 3 conversation into maybe he could sneak into day 2. That's how I saw it with him, but I was very impressed by what he was doing. Now, next guy, another person I have not scouted to this point, but LaQuint Allen Jr. out of Syracuse. He's a running back. I just thought every time I watched him this week, he was doing well. Just consistently looked good. He'd win the receiving drills the running backs would run. He would do well on blocking. He was just generally someone who stood out in a good way. So I think he's someone who's going to earn, getting onto my big board, getting a look, and being legitimately considered. Now, Tommy Hill, mentioned him for a moment. I thought he had a good week, especially a really good finish, having, I think it was a PBU and definitely an interception in the end zone. A big play for him. He was someone I thought really stood out late and will probably have a nice final impression on some of the scouts that were there. Now, other people that stood out to me, you have Harold Fannin Jr., who I thought just played really well in practices. I thought he did a great job as a blocker. He did well as a tight end in the receiving game. I heard people say they thought he was faster than what he appeared on film. Ultimately, he just seems the part. He seems like he fits every different category you're looking for, aside from obviously not being 6'5", 255 or 260 pounds. But the guy doesn't play like that. The guy doesn't play like his size, right? He plays like he is that 6'5", 255 pound guy. He's just not actually listed as that. Now, getting to our next guy here, Josh Connerly. He was someone who was getting a lot of coaching after practices this week. It was kind of unfortunate because day 2, I wanted to interview Marcus and Bo, and I went down on the field for it. It was the only time that I actually found the player I was looking for on the field, and they spent basically the whole interview period just practicing with the Miami coach. So I never got to talk to Marcus, plus a bunch of people cut in front of me to do interviews with him when he was actually available. It is what it is, but it's kind of a kill or be killed mentality out there with the interviews at the Senior Bowl. So Josh Connerly, though, going back to him, he was taking coaching. He was improving. Thought he played better as the week went on. Obviously, we had mentioned the one rep where he got blown up by Mike Green. But I think this is someone who ultimately has a lot more of a ceiling than where he's at right now. I think he's a rising player. I think that he is someone who legitimately could be a starting left tackle in the NFL and could be a very good one. So if he's that, maybe the first round conversation is legitimate there. Now, Marcus and Bo, getting back to him for a moment, he was around Connerly a lot. I just felt like in Bo, as he moved around wherever he was playing, it's kind of the same thing I've seen before, where you have some really impressive reps, right? You have some where he'll take a guy down, right? It looks great. But you also get reps where he just loses immediately, right? The hand placement's off, or he lunges, and a guy gets around him. It's like, if you do that, you're blowing up a play, you're probably losing yards, and you might be killing a drive. So can we get away with that just for the good moments? I don't know. So I wasn't super impressed by what Mbo did this week. But is he really a stock down guy for me? Not necessarily. I still think he has some great tools. I think he could be really good in the NFL. Plus, good thing on him to be taking as much coaching as he is out there. So I do appreciate that. But ultimately, I just didn't think he did a ton for his stock out here. He did not stand out compared to a lot of these other players. Now, someone who stood out in, unfortunately, a very bad way was Jonah Monheim. He's someone I liked a lot when I originally watched him. He made the move to go from tackle to center this last year, and he was okay, but didn't have an incredible season. And then you get to the Senior Bowl, and the guy's anchor just doesn't exist a lot of plays. He is just getting thrown back into the quarterback. It's just stuff you cannot have, right? It's not like that every single play. But if that's happening so often, then you're going to be looking like Luke Fortner, right? And we don't want to go through that again. So what I took from this was I feel like I went from Jonah Monheim could be a solid starter, or at least be capable of starting for a team, to now I don't really want him to start. I want him to develop, and I don't really want to put him on the field at all if I have to. So that's just kind of how I felt about him. Now, a stock up guy, getting back to that, was Anthony Belton. I thought the way he dealt with speed this week was a really good answer to what was a major concern. This is a bigger guy who has ultimately, had some hard times maybe against speed rushers, but he was ready for it. He played very well against it. Every time I watched him, he's looking good. And I think he's someone that probably fairly should go on day 2 at this point. But I was very impressed by how he played this week. Now, just the last couple guys here. Wyatt Milam, I felt like had ups and downs. He did change positions. It's worth noting, right? So it's not like you're just going to go there and play incredible right off the bat. That's not very common. But Milam, ultimately, he did struggle this week. So I don't think he helped his stock. I don't know if he really killed it either. But that's just kind of the takeaway I had. Now, one little nugget for you guys. I did talk to him after practice today for a moment. He was signing stuff for fans, including myself. And I asked him, or I didn't ask him. I kind of just told him. I was like, you got a lot of fans in Jacksonville, just so you know. Because I know there's a lot of people who like him here. He's been a guy who's been mocked to Jacksonville a lot by fans. And he did say he would love to play in Jacksonville if he got the opportunity. So take that how you want. Now, a couple more guys from the national team. Gray Zabel, he's a big winner from this week. Just he basically did what Milam was hoping to do, where he moved around, he played different positions, but he just dominated at all of them, right? He played at a very high level. He was able to just consistently keep himself between the quarterback and the rusher. Just did a phenomenal job of that. The movement skills were impressive. He was able to maintain leverage. It just looked like he was gliding around the field and just holding anyone off they wanted to, right? He played really well. I think he's easily a stock-up guy. I think at this point he's easily a second-round pick. Maybe a team even takes him in the first round, given that this first round does not look as appeasing or appetizing as what it has before. So ultimately, big winner, I think, for Gray Zabel. And we also did an interview with him, so make sure to check that out. Like I said, I'll put that on YouTube later, and it's already on Twitter. Now, 3 more guys from National. You have Ozzy Trapilo, who I have not scouted yet. The rest of these National guys I have not got to yet. But he looks like he could start at tackle. He deserves to be on our radar, and he deserves to be someone who people are watching very closely, going back through the film, scouting, and grading, right? He is not just a random name in this class. Same with Elijah Arroyo out of Miami. He had some big wins downfield this week, has some legitimate speed he showed off. I even saw some people joking about him being the Evan Ingram replacement for this team. I won't go that far yet. Of course, I have not got my scouting report done on him, but I thought he had a good week. Thought he stood out a lot of times. I think he did have a drop at one point that was kind of rough, but he's someone who's got legitimate speed to burn. So you love to see that. Getting to our last guy here from National. Try to say this name right. Oluwafemi Oladejo, UCLA edge rusher. This was someone that we had a clip come out on one of my Twitter posts showing the Jaguars actually speak to him. I think it was Ethan Waugh who was talking to him, so that was cool to see. But he was just one of those guys who I felt like played good all week. Every time I watched him, just looks like a legitimate prospect and someone I'm going to have on my radar and be checking out before the draft. Now we'll get to the American roster, and this won't be as long. I didn't have as many takeaways from American as I did with National. Don't know why that was, but that was just kind of how things turned out. I thought to start, Deone Walker, he kind of just generally had like a light version of what T'Vondre Sweat did. Like you saw some impressive plays where the power is insane. You saw those moments where he just like shows off this crazy twitchiness for a 340-pound linemen, and he just, I think, did enough to stand out this week and solidify himself as an earlier pick in this class. And with how well Sweat did for the Tennessee Titans this last class, I could see Walker being a second round pick pretty easily. I don't think that's crazy to say. I think that's where most people have him. But I think that's solidified. I would be shocked if he fell any further than the end of the second round. Just don't see how that would happen. Now, Trevor Etienne. This is someone, I know he got a lot of crap for declaring when he did. He also got crap for calling himself an SEC champion. That pissed off Florida fans. It's not a big deal to me, but I think that's at least what I saw. But he was looked at as like kind of just an average running back in this class. Well, I thought he had a good week. I thought, especially as a receiver, he did a phenomenal job. He was able to consistently get vertical and win on those plays. I think he just brings a lot in that regard. The speed is impressive. He was just killing linebackers all week, which the drills are set up to where linebackers don't win very often. So, keep that in mind. That's why we don't really talk about linebackers much from the Senior Bowl, because they're just set up to fail, unfortunately. Now, getting to the next guy, Jalen Milroe would be someone I had to take away from. And honestly, it's just that his pre-draft process has not started out well. He had some really rough decisions he made on the field. Had some interceptions. I thought the decision-making was very questionable. And it made it very clear to me that he is going to be a developmental quarterback entering the NFL. There is no dream of anything else being the case. And so, if you're the Giants, say you're thinking Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders go 1 and 2. Say you just think that's the case. After this week, I'm definitely not picking Jalen Milroe at 3. Because I don't think he saved my job. Right? So that's kind of the issue there. I still think he goes first round. I can see a team trading up for him. But it's a hard situation because he didn't really play that well. He had some decent throws, but ultimately, he's going to be a tools prospect. Now, someone who stood out really well, and actually, he might have had a really nice catch from Jalen Milroe, but that's Jack Betch, TCU wide receiver. Just someone who's been good at everything this week, but really stood out with these big catches, right? Just very impressive plays. I did see him get rocked today. Unfortunately, he got hit pretty damn hard by one of the Georgia defenders. But he's made some really impressive grabs, and there should be no question about his ability to catch the football, even in contested windows. So that's a valuable player, right? Looked fine as a blocker, too. So it's hard for me to imagine that he doesn't have a role in the NFL. Another receiver that did well this week, Ty Felton. Just felt like every time I watched him, he was solid, right? He was playing well. Not someone who had problems, not someone who stood out in a bad way. So was thrilled to see that. Now, one of my biggest risers from this week is Maxwell Hairston. I thought Maxwell was just good at everything he did. More than good, I would even say great. Whether he played man or zone, he was just consistently in the right spots. He was playing it well. In run defense, he did well too. And I think on top of that, the way he's going to interview with teams, it's going to get him taken high. I could see first round being on the table for Hairston. He is an eccentric guy. He's someone who can get along with anyone. He's someone who is going to be a great teammate. He talked about his leadership and how he wants to be an important, integral part of a football team. And if you haven't checked out the interview, and like I said, I'll put it up on YouTube later. It's on Twitter. Definitely check it out when you get the chance, because it was a great interview we had with him. He even had some thoughts on Liam Cohen that he shared about just how special of a play caller he is. Now, getting through some of our last guys here, so we don't have too awfully many left. Shamar Stewart, I did not get to watch that close this week, but he did end up leaving early, which tells you a lot. He had a very impressive week. He had some big plays, and he's undoubtedly a stock-up guy, and at this point, probably undoubtedly a first-round prospect. Now, Jalen Royals, he's one of my favorite players in this class. He's someone who I thought this week really separated himself as a route runner, especially the release packages he had. And we had a very good interview with him. He was the first guy I talked to at the media day last night. And he's someone who I think he can compete at the highest level on the field and be a dog on the field. And off the field, he's someone who's humble, someone who's able to learn, someone who wants to improve. Just so easy to root for. I can't say much more than that. One of the things I talked to him as well about was run blocking. Because I feel like that is an important thing now for Jacksonville, and considering who we're going to bring in. Because when Liam Cohen went to Tampa, he said this himself, he told all those players, you have to be great as run blockers. You have to impact the game that way. If you're not doing this, it's not going to work. And they all helped, and they had an incredible rushing offense. I want to see the same thing happen here. So that was a big prerequisite. I asked him about it. He did acknowledge that a lot of receivers don't take it that seriously, but that is an area that he wants to get better, an area that he's improving, and an area he thinks is important. Take that as you want, right? So this could be a guy who fits in Jacksonville, and I sure hope that he gets drafted by him. I think he would be a phenomenal pick. Now, speaking of someone who has been linked to Jacksonville, linked as maybe someone Liam Cohen would want, RJ Harvey. So Harvey, he is really interesting. He is really small. That's the concern for me. That can also be really good for running backs. I think 5'8" is about like the smallest I want you to be. I'm pretty sure he's like 5'7". Might be wrong on that, but he's not a big guy. But he just does he does everything really well. He's a good receiver. Of course, he is going to struggle if people are close by or things are contested, but he's got good hands. He runs good routes. He is a very dynamic rusher. He's going to bring a lot to the game in those regards. The question would probably be, what can you do as a pass protector? Because he is a smaller guy, right? And that's not going to be easy to go up against really good players when you're at that disadvantage. Now, 4 more guys we'll talk about. Hunter Wohler, I did not watch a ton of, but I just thought he did well. Thought he had good athleticism on the field. That was maybe the primary concern. Like, this is a smart player. This is someone who should be a good, strong safety in the NFL. But are you athletically limited? I thought Wohler did a good job of keeping with the receivers that he guarded and just staying on top of them and being involved at the catch point. So this is someone I think he can do it all. I think he's capable of being a good, strong safety in the NFL. Could be a good fit for Jackson. Now, 3 more guys. Hopefully I'll stop coughing any day now. It's been like a month straight of this crap. Upton Stout. Size is the question, right? Like, that's obviously where this thing starts. But he is a sticky, sticky corner. Phenomenal athleticism. Keeps up with receivers well. Is involved at the catch point. Just very good in that regard. Someone who's going to consistently be hanging in there if he's asked to play man. I think he could play zone as well. But he really stood out in man coverage this week. Now, Emory Jones, this was just a confusing one for me this week. They kept playing him at tackle the whole week. I do not understand why. I saw him one time at guard. And this is someone everyone is talking about as a guard prospect. They play him at tackle, nonstop. And you just see the same thing, right? It's what he's done. He's a very physical player. He's very aggressive. It can lead to great plays. It can also lead to you being on the ground. There's a lot of that from Emory Jones. But still, there's a lot of tools here. It's a lot you can get out of him. That's exciting to see. Now, I will talk really quickly about Amar Norman Lott. Thought just a little bit I saw from him. He's just such an incredible athlete. And even though he hasn't played a ton with Tennessee, even though the snap counts are low, He is a phenomenal athlete, and that should separate him enough to be considered a legitimate high-up prospect in this class. Probably a day 2 guy. The final guy we'll talk about really quick, Jackson Hawes. I think it's kind of simple looking at him. Like, he's an incredible blocker. You already know that. He's built for it. He does it very well. He consistently wins. But are you anything as a receiver? And thankfully for him this week, he had one of the best catches of the week. He had a nice one-hand grab. Thought he did fine during receiving drills. I'm not going to say he's great, but ultimately, I thought he did enough, and I think that helped his stock in saying that you can at least have him go on the field and run a route here and there. So that's what I got. And there's obviously plenty of players that I'm sure went stock up, stock down that I didn't really talk about. These are just the players I got to watch really closely. My takeaways from the week. But yeah, it was a fun experience. Got to meet a lot of guys. Got to hang out with a lot of Jets fans, I felt like, through most of the week. Very good content creators. Guys to follow on Twitter. Just some great stuff from them. So very appreciative for that if they're watching this. And yeah, it was a great week. It's been fun. Unfortunately, it is over though. Got to go back to real life here in a couple days, and you know we'll have some coverage still on this. We'll kind of wrap things up. We'll have the interviews up hopefully later tonight, and then tomorrow I'm hoping I can have a mock draft ready to go in the morning that I can have released while I'm driving back, just as a post-Senior Bowl thing. So with that all said, I want to thank our channel members really quick. Premier Seer 904, Nightmare Eco, Gator John Bites, and Scrubber Ducky 500. Thank you all for your support. Thank you guys for watching, making this all possible. It's been a blast this week. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. Enjoy watching the Senior Bowl on Saturday if you plan to. And finally, go Jags.